These 300,000 francs did not exist so far as the English were concerned, and the emperor could only use them by revealing the fact that he had hidden them. There remained, before having recourse to the money which the emperor had in Europe, the funds which his companions had brought with them. Las Casas, before leaving Paris, had gotten possession of 4,000 louis, which he put at the disposal of the emperor. Bertrand, on July 19th, had, through his lawyer, Monsieur Foucault de Pavon, and Messrs. Baring, brothers of London, invested a sum of about 300,000 francs and 5% Navy annuities, and supposed that the stock would, as soon as he wrote, be sold by Baring, acting as his agent. Besides, he had with him the sum of 1,500 pounds for immediate disposal. Gorgo possessed nothing, Masson less than nothing. What the little colony found in its possession was about 500,000 francs, and 500,000 francs would not go far, especially if the English government reduced to 8,000 pounds, an allowance which normally, upon Cockburn's calculations, might reach 20,000, and could scarcely drop below 16,000 pounds. Besides the 200,000 to 300,000 francs, which represented his expenses, had he not also to pay the salaries of the officers, the wages of his servants, and provide clothes and upkeep for all? The household was not raised to imperial rank with impunity. It was not with impunity that it was administered by the most wasteful man, even of his own resources, the most inventive regarding expenses, the least capable of keeping accounts, of stopping wastage, and of preventing chaos. Masson excelled in all, and remedied it. Did not the emperor himself feel obliged to examine the accounts of his maitre d'hotel? It was not, therefore, under Masson's stewardship that living was economical. So when the 500,000 francs were exhausted, what was the emperor to do? He had arranged 3 settlements. The first in 1814, by which he had entrusted 1,600,000 francs to Count Lavalette. Of these 1,600,000 francs, Lavalette had sent 800,000 francs to Prince Eugène and 400,000 to the Maison Perregaux in Lafitte. According to an account presented to the emperor in 1815, he had paid out in various ways 120,000 francs. There therefore remained 280,000 francs to the emperor's knowledge. There existed, therefore, some 1,600,000 francs, 155,000 in the hands of Lavalette, of which later he confessed he was a debtor, with Prince Eugène 800,000 francs at the emperor's disposal, and 400,000 francs with Perregaux and Lafitte. At least a total of 1,355,000 francs. The 400,000 francs with Perregaux and Lafitte, to which, upon the emperor's command, had been added the 800,000 francs of Prince Eugène, were added to the 3 millions, and not 6 millions, as he thought, which on June 18th, 1815, the emperor, on the entreaties of Pérouse, his treasurer, had ordered to be taken from the Tuileries and deposited in the Bank Lafitte. It was already very late, and it was necessary for the departure of wagons to obtain an authorization given by Fouché. Fouché knew what was going on, and the secret was well kept by him and the others involved. If he had been betrayed, there's no doubt that the emperor's 3 millions would have been confiscated, like all the personal and real property of the Bonapartes. Finally, there was the third settlement, perhaps the most important. In 1815, the emperor had sent to King Joseph considerable bills which were entrusted to Comte Clary, or taken to the United States, upon which the emperor drew scarcely 100,000 francs, and which did not figure on any account. It is necessary to mention this fact, considering the imputations which were made regarding it. As for Napoleon, it was essential that the English should remain in ignorance of whether he had any resources, and in case he might be forced to draw some from Europe, who would supply it. As for Lowe, it was urgently necessary for him that he should carry out his instructions, and that he should reduce expenses to the sum named by the ministry. So he went about his task with great zeal, hoping that, thanks to the victualling vessels sent from England, the price of provisions would drop a little, and that in this way a reduction in expenses would be effected without causing any very appreciable curtailment in the comfort or the needs which had up to then been granted to the prisoners. But he added, in case I cannot reduce the expenses in such a manner that they will not exceed the appointed sum, They have been definitely warned that surplus expenses will be their business, and that a reduction will be effected in the expenses to prove that the emperor was in a position to supply the funds necessary to meet his expenses. Lowe related that, according to Balcombe, Masson had offered to give him, in Bonaparte's name, a bill for 30,000 francs on hope of Amsterdam, whom he had not a florin, and on whom he had no letters from Lafitte. It was one of Masson's usual boasts made upon the emperor's suggestion that there had firstly to be spent 4,000 Napoleons illegally set apart by the English. On June 16th, the emperor broached the question point blank with Hudson Lowe. He said that he had enough money to provide everything, but he disliked sending unsealed letters, and he would not tolerate it. On the 19th, Masson, in a conversation with Major Goriker, entered into detail. The emperor requested nothing more than to discharge even the whole of his expenses, provided he be permitted to use his own resources through the medium of sealed letters, or to be allowed to draw upon some of his relatives, Princess Pauline, Prince Joseph, his own son, or Prince Eugene, and that these requests for money be forwarded in sealed envelopes. If the governor is prepared to make some proposal respecting this, the emperor is ready to entertain it. Struck by this list of relatives who were doubtless prepared to contribute towards the emperor's maintenance, Lowe wrote to Bathurst, "Your lordship has so many means of communicating with these people that the question of money for his support now seems to be one of the least troublesome respecting him. If his relatives and old friends are possessed of such sentiments as he attributes to them, in the meantime, the economies practiced in the provisioning of the house were the more evident on account of the ill will of the purveyors. Due, no doubt, to the cut in their profits, they delivered goods of inferior quality, very often damaged, and in such small quantities that there was a real scarcity at Longwood. Further, although the governor had announced that poultry, fish, and vegetables could be purchased, and the account sent to Balcombe refused to pay for everything. The butcher was no longer willing to provide meat because he said the French were so difficult to please. The vegetables were uneatable, the bread hard, made with bad flour. In short, the economy campaign of the governor bordered upon the starvation of the prisoners. It was a resurrection of the question. Believing himself sufficiently well informed of the prisoners' needs, the governor went to Longwood on August 17th with the object of suggesting to the emperor the necessity of his contributing a part of his expenses if he intended to have around him so large a household. At first interview with Bertrand, to whom he was sent, was particularly stormy. The Grand Marshal remarked that all correspondence having ceased because of the embargo on sealed letters, the emperor could not discuss his personal affairs with those to whom he had entrusted them. Lowe replied that he had not come to enter into these side issues, and that he had had a discussion with General Bonaparte himself, and also with Count Masson, and that neither had raised any difficulty respecting the method of procuring funds. Bertrand terminated the conversation and sent the governor to Masson with parting expression that he desired to have the minimum of conversation with him, either by word of mouth or in writing. The governor replied, went to complain to Napoleon, who refused to receive him, and the same day wrote to Masson that it was utterly impossible to discharge the expenses of the house out of the sum allotted by his government, unless economy was enforced regarding certain things, which would naturally reduce the comfort which up till then the members of the entourage had enjoyed. Having been very frankly informed by General Bonaparte that he had at his disposal in various parts of Europe monetary resources by which of means there was a surplus. In fact, the whole of his expenses could be defrayed. He begged him to inquire of the general before he himself attempted some considerable economies that might perhaps prove most unpleasant, both to Bonaparte and to the members of his suite, whether he was prepared to take the consequences of such a step, or whether he preferred to put at the governor's disposal sufficient money to cover the surplus expenses. Lowe returned along with the following day, August 18th. It was the fifth interview he had had with the emperor. It was the last. He was accompanied by Admiral Sir Pulteney Malcolm, who had succeeded Cockburn, and he arrived with the determination to lay his complaints against Bertrand and to obtain a formal reply to the money question. Napoleon, weary of the methods which Low employed in his punctilious performance of duty and the increasing strictness of his orders, appeared to take advantage of the occasion to humiliate him in the presence of others and give vent with some considerable heat to the feelings which it aroused in him. The governor then expressed his sorrow. For a while the emperor remained silent, and when he made up his mind to speak, he addressed the admiral, pretending to ignore the governor, and speaking of him in the third person. He did this, he did that, stinging him with succinct expressions, and in each of his denials replying with rebukes like lashes of a whip. It was the question of letters, of communication, such as they were, which was under consideration, but the money matter was basis. However, in the very detailed story of his last visit, Low only included this phrase, which he imputed to the emperor: "You want money. I have none, if it is not in the possession of my friends, but I cannot send any letters." One would say that although in an official dispatch Low was ashamed to insist on the matter, he himself felt how low the ministry had stooped by insisting on the cuts. The emperor and he certainly said other things before Low left him, with his hat on and with no other parting remark than, "I wish you good day." Had not Napoleon told him, as Las Casas and O'Meara have related, that he was going to invite to his table the brave officers of the 53rd, so that they would not refuse, he was sure to take their dinner with an old soldier like himself? Such was very likely the case, though Low said nothing about it. In a postscript to the protest, which the emperor got Masson to endorse, the latter, after recalling that in a letter dated the 17th, Low had added an estimate of the Longwood expenses showing the minimum to be £20,000. He said, "You require an amount of £12,000 from the emperor, your government allowing you only £8,000 for the whole expenses. I have had the honor of informing you that the emperor possesses no money, and that for a whole year he has neither received nor written a single letter, and that he is complete ignorance of what is taking place or may have taken place in Europe, forcibly transported to this rock 2,000 leagues distant without being able to receive or write any letters. He is wholly at the disposal of English agents. The emperor has always desired and now desires to provide all his expenses himself, and he will do so as soon as you make it possible, by raising the ban placed on the merchants of this country assisting regarding his correspondence, which shall not be liable to any investigation on your part or that of your agents." Then, having alluded to Lord Bathurst's instructions communicated by Low, he continued, "Do not your ministers realize then, monsieur, that the spectacle of a great man grappling with adversity is a most noble one? Do they not see that Napoleon at St. Helena, beset by persecution of every kind, which he endures with resignation, is grander, more sacred, more revered than upon the proudest throne in the world, where so long he was the master of kings? Those who show disrespect to Napoleon in such circumstances only dishonor their own character and the country they represent."